Returning for a second interview inside the Hyper Room is Andy Park, the director of visual development at Marvel Studios and the man behind the look of the iconic costume design for Shang-Chi in the newest hit Marvel Cinematic Universe film, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Check out a past episode of the Hyper Room where Andy and I walk through his career on how he started in comics and worked his way into concept art at Marvel Studios. For this episode, though, I thought it'd be great to just ask him back so we can talk all things Shang-Chi. Since the movie hit so big and the visual design was so fantastic, mixing the comic books, the MCU, and Chinese mythology, I thought it was good to have Andy come talk to us through his and his art team's thought process on working on these designs even before Marvel brought in the director destined Daniel Cretton or yet to cast stars Simu Liu and Tony Leung Chiu-wai. A quick note though, Andy says 2019 for the first art development, but we reconfirmed this after recording that he began the art in 2018, and this piece you see that he posted on his social networks was completed around the time that Simu Liu was officially cast as Shang-Chi, which was 4 days before it was revealed at San Diego Comic-Con 2019. You can watch that on YouTube. It's great to see. Also, a note, this podcast is full of spoilers, so if you haven't seen Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings yet, just save this and come back later. So, do some one-finger push-ups, and then relax and listen to me and Andy Park from Marvel Studios talk all things Shang-Chi, Black Widow, and hints on what he's working on next inside the Hyper Room. The Hyper Room. Hey, Andy, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Casey.
So yeah, we're having you back again for a second talk. There's a whole long interview we did on your entire career up till about WandaVision. So it's so great to have you back so we can talk about Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. So it's been out for a week now. We're recording this as it goes into its second week. What is the feedback that you're hearing amongst you and yourself and your team about the movie and how it's doing?
Oh man, I think we're just through the moon and just joy and happiness because I think every single one. I've been working here for 11 plus years, and my whole history and the history of the whole MCU has been essentially a risk, right? Like from the very first Iron Man, it wasn't. The industry was saying that it's not, that's not a top tier Marvel character, C-lister, not even a B-lister maybe. And then, eventually that was proven to be a great character. And then eventually the lead up to Avengers, then Guardians, what is this crazy movie? Ant-Man. And, so it's always been the thing. Like I've been working here and there's certain movies that I've worked on that it's like, okay, this is going to be a hit. But if you're working on like Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, you kind of know. Yeah. But even then, you're still like, is it going to be good, right? Like we're building up 10 years of the cinematic universe, and will it stick the landing? Like, so there's always those fears, and definitely with Shang-Chi, being the first, title Asian character, superhero in the Marvel universe, headlining his own movie. So much is riding on that as well. So, the pressure's on for every single movie, but this one, in a lot of ways, like I felt it even more, especially myself being Asian American. So sigh of relief. And it's not just about the numbers. More importantly, was seeing the reviews and people's reactions. And that was something that just like, wow, I knew this movie was good, but to the degree of how people react, like, I can never imagine, because I'm just so close to these movies. It's always hard to know exactly how good I know they're good, but how good they are, and to see people's reactions, it's so rewarding to see. Going into the weekend, I remember just watching like Thursday the Twitter feed or the social media, and then you see the numbers come in, and then Friday, and I think it started off, projections was like a lot of people were saying 45 at the best, 4-day weekend, and then you start seeing the projections go up to 50, and then it went to 50 to 60 to 70, and then it ended up being what I think it was like 95 for the 4-day weekend, so close
amazing.
to that. So all of us were just so happy, we're so ecstatic, and this past weekend happened.
Yeah, I think like looking at the Rotten Tomatoes score, I think is very showing. I don't think any of the MCU movies have scored 99% approval from the audience on Rotten Tomatoes. That's massive, right?
That is crazy. I think the latest I saw on social media was this the highest rated comic movie of all time.
Yeah, wow.
Not just MCU, like higher than even the Dark Knight, and I'm like, wow,
Wow, I
that's
know that seems that
amazing.
seems crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's amazing that it was like that. And another thing I want to say, I know you don't have anything to do with the trailers, but I tell you, that trailer was a little bit underwhelming, right? I think a lot of people were like, yeah, I'll go see it, but there was not a lot of like buzz going into it. And I think actually whoever did that, whoever approved that trailer really it was the right way to do it. Because when I'm watching the movie, I'm like, what? This movie doesn't seem like that trailer at all. It seems way better. And so when you leave, you're really under promise and you really over delivered on a great film.
I think trailers are such a tricky beast
Yeah.
to tackle because, like, obviously with this movie, the whole third act is like, you go into this whole different world and stuff that happens. But so there's a lot of things with these movies you don't want to leak or you don't want to spoil, right? So but you want to give them enough to entice them to come to the theater.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, trailers are hard. Trailers are hard.
I watched the trailer again before we started recording, and I was like, oh no, everything was there. It's not like it was that hidden. All the stuff with Taulo and all that stuff was there, but it's so fast you just don't know what to expect, right? So it was just incredible.
Yeah.
Plus, you can't see Tony Leung's performance in a trailer with he's only in
Yep.
it for like seconds, right? So it's just like you just have to go with it, and I'm glad that the Marvel universe has fan base will just show up and then it's so great they'll go and take their family. Like that's the thing, I wish there was no pandemic. I wanted to get my dad and get my relatives and take them all to the cinema to see
Yeah.
it again because this is the movie night. I guess this is kind of like what happened with Black Panther, right? Coming out of Shang-Chi. Like I just honestly I was there watching the movie. I saw it in 3D and
Oh, nice.
every 5 minutes I was like, this is amazing. Like I just couldn't believe what you guys put on screen for this. And I loved Endgame. Like even Endgame was like, I was like, oh, look at this, look at this, look at this. But Shang-Chi was like such a left field, like just a great. And I think that's a lesson that we'll all learn going forward because the Matrix Resurrections trailer just dropped. It gave away a lot of stuff. It's very exciting, but now the expectations are super high for that one, which as we know in the past, it's kind of hard to live up to that. But I think the
Yeah.
Shang-Chi, the Eternals trailer as well plays a lot of this as well. Like people are like, okay, but I know Kevin Feige and your team and everybody there knows what they're doing, and the Eternals will also blow us away. But Shang-Chi had a little bit more, I think, not negative stuff, but a bit more baggage because, it's an Asian kung fu movie, right? Where
Hmm.
we've seen all the tropes, we have a feeling of what we know what's going on, but then we don't know anything about it going into it. So it's just incredible. So let's
Yeah.
go back a little bit. You just dropped today, before we're recording this, you dropped your original keyframe artwork that you designed for the movie. Can you talk a little bit about that? I believe because my first question was going to be, when did you guys start doing the visual development for?
We started it. I think it was mid 2019. I want to say it might have been even before that, but yeah, we no, actually, sorry, we started that beginning of 2019 because a lot of times our department, which is the visual development department of Marvel Studios, we're embedded in the studio. We're full time artists and a full time department, and we start on these films and now Disney Plus shows even a lot of times even before there's any set story. So that was the case with this as well. Like they knew they wanted to do Shang-Chi, so the producer will come to us and say, hey, we're going to be doing this movie, can you guys do some early blue sky concepts and designs, but without any real context beyond the comic, right? So that's sometimes that's some of the most fun stuff that we get to do because we're just literally coming with our own thoughts on not only what the characters can look like, but we'll do keyframes, which are like story illustrations, right? A still moment, yeah, and then we'll just do high level whatever thing, anything that we can think of that would help inspire, help sell the project, something that will set the tone for this is what potentially it could be like. Is this going to be a sci-fi film? Is it going to be a full-on fantasy film? So playing with all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the keyframe that you mentioned that I posted on my social, that was one of the last things I did on the project because majority of my time not only leading the team of artists, so I'm art directing, interacting with the producer and directors. I was art wise, I was designing Shang-Chi's hero look, his costume. So after that got approved, I was working on the keyframe of kind of the climax moment,
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Shang-Chi, the rings circling around him. You see
yeah.
the battle up in the sky, battle on the ground. So it's this kind of big pivotal moment. And a lot of times when we do these keyframes, they're not always just like, okay, this is going to be the exact shot in the film. It's,
Yeah.
it's supposed to encompass a
Yeah.
whole series of things that happens in a climax. So that's kind of, and it's a challenge because you're trying to get that all in a composition, in a shot that can be beautiful, and it could be inspiring, so that when the director and the producer see this, they can be like, I want the greatest compliment that we've heard through the years when we've done a keyframe that really kind of knocks it out of the park is like, I want to see that movie. It's a hard one to kind of always get that comment, but that's the goal, right? So that's kind of, yeah, that's what I did for that
That's what we
keyframe.
talked about in our last interview, and that's something I like to talk about more about, is that you guys are really defining the look and feel of the film with the producer and the director, so that the entire cast and crew, like of 300 people, plus all the studio heads and the theaters, get an idea of what they're about to go through, right? Because a lot of this creative stuff that's why you were saying the Marvel Studios is one of the only studios that has a full-time, always working visual development team, just to keep working on ideas to show people like, this is what it could look like. This is what we're thinking of, because, it's hard to imagine just by looking at the comic book that this is what's going to happen in the film.
Yeah, it's definitely something that Kevin Feige, Victoria Alonso, Lou D'Esposito, they set up in the early days of Marvel Studios. And it's very much, the studio is very much like a startup, because it was a very small operation when they did Iron Man. That's when they were their own studio. It wasn't picked up by Disney yet, right? And then with the success of that, much like a startup, they get picked up by the big conglomerate. Then they have now the resources and the backing of a big corporation like Disney. But because of their success early on, we were able to maintain that same kind of startup kind of way of working. So yeah, that's our goal. Like, that's why our department was created in the early days. It was Ryan Meinerding, pivotal on the Iron Man film, and then Captain America, and then Charlie Wen, who was pivotal on the Thor film, the first one.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
from there, they hired me. I was the first one they hired to form the visual development team, and then eventually Rodney Frontabella and Jackson Z, Anthony Francisco, and then through the years we've grown different artists. But the whole idea is that we're always there to create artwork, to create designs, to create inspiration, proof of concept, quality control, because we also do things in the post. So we're working alongside with visual effects. If there's certain things that aren't looking great or working, they'll come to us and say, hey, can you help refine these things to give direction for certain elements?
yeah,
Like one example is like Hela, so even in
yeah,
post with the VFX, because that character requires so much visual effects post work, but it wasn't landing, it wasn't like looking great yet. So that's when they'll come to us, and I'll do a lot of like kind of paint overs on VFX stills. And then throughout the whole production, as we're creating concept art, they put our concept art in what they call a war room, right? This is where the main meeting, whatever, they dedicate a room to. This is the Shang-Chi room, where the director and the producer and the writers meet on a daily basis. The writers are in there, and then they put all our artwork all over the wall. So you also have comic book reference and points of reference for what they want to do for the story, but then it's just littered with our artwork, and it just becomes a place where they can talk about things, where they can be on the same page. Because it's one thing to see something just on a screen, but when you see it all on the wall,
yeah.
right, all together in context, it's a place that to kind of garner maximum motivation, inspiration, motivate, and just excitement for any given project.
Yeah, it's glad you brought up the comics, because I wouldn't say I was the biggest master of kung fu comic reader, but I knew of him and I remember the ending. And I've since then read a lot about why it wasn't reprinted as much and things like that. But I think of all the MCU films, maybe outside Guardians, maybe you had the most leeway in terms of developing it from scratch, right? Because the original Master of Kung Fu comic, created by Steve Englehart and Jim Starlin, the guy who created Thanos, also co-created this character. They had him looking like, obviously they were inspired by Bruce Lee movies, but they had him wearing some kind of like red and yellow karate outfit. And then
Mm-hmm.
over the years, they've changed the costume so many times, took away the headband and things like that. how much do you guys look at the comics and as opposed to maybe even like more like Chinese mythology or Chinese culture, martial arts culture in designing the outfit?
I think, yeah, generally speaking, like the comics is the first place we go to, right, for
Yeah.
inspiration, because we're not just creating something out of thin air. Like the whole MCU is based off of the, almost 100 years of amazing creations from people like Stan Lee and Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby. And yeah, so but Shang-Chi was a unique one, right? So I think because of the past and the troubled past and the origins that are controversial,
Yeah.
right? And I think even though that original kung fu outfit you mentioned, it's just based off of kung fu outfits. And then for me, my knowledge of Shang-Chi, because I never really read those comics growing up, even though I was a huge comic book reader. But um, what I remember, he was basically, yeah, he did look like Bruce Lee, right? Like he was basically shirtless.
Yeah.
So all he had was like kung fu pants. So for this movie, this was a unique one where we're not really looking at the comics, especially when it comes to like, what is he gonna wear? Well, sorry, I will take that back. I'll take back because I'm just right now I was referring to like the origins of Shang-Chi. When it came to the more contemporary looks of Shang-Chi in the comics, maybe from the 2000s on, like that's when he started donning his kind of red, it's more red jumpsuit, right? It
Yeah,
was more
right.
of a
It
jumpsuit, and
looks
then
like the
he's got
Game
that
of Death outfit, except instead of yellow, it was red.
red, and then it's got that triangle black
Yeah.
inverted triangle like motif on the chest area.
Yeah.
So that one certainly, that's where I was looking mainly for inspiration.
I thought the choices for the costume were great, especially when how they were introduced in the movie with, darker colors were part of the dragon scales and all that stuff. It was quite interesting.
Yeah, I think that was a long journey because I think in this film, the whole idea was that we didn't have to be beholden, to
Yeah,
the comic
the
comic book
comics.
origins. So
Yeah.
it gave us more leeway to be like, let's create something new and fresh. Yeah, something that we can all be proud of. Not only Asians and Asians Americans, but like just the world, right?
Yeah.
Can see this, and we can be represented in the, in a very positive way. So I think that gave a lot more leeway. And then because, as I mentioned, we're working so early on, even before any script is finalized. So I'm already doing designs as Dave Callahan writing. So there was no set story on like, what is this costume? How does he get it? Like those
Oh,
things weren't
okay.
established yet. So I think I was just doing the full gambit. I was playing from very traditional, doing research into Chinese history in the past when it comes to fashion, clothing, to all the way going to more of an urban, contemporary, modern day feel. So I did the full range. I even did some, the shirtless versions and or just wearing a tank top. I did everything from jackets to hoodies to very traditional Chinese clothing to more comic accurate, going
Yeah.
looking like the more contemporary red suit that we're talking about with the black V
Yeah.
that's going down.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a big exploration, and as they started solidifying story, that's when it started like going closer and closer to like the choices of what is the right direction to go.
Got it.
It was a long process. It took months, and then eventually landed on the look that you see in the film.
And you have to not only design for him, like in the story, the entire Taolo village, the group have to all wear a version of that outfit, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting collaboration because the Tao Lo costumes were designed by the costume designer and Kim
Okay.
Barrett.
Okay.
So it's as we're designing characters, like, so art department would design like the Shang-Chi look, as well as Xialing and Razor Fist, and then like the Mandarin, oh sorry, not the Mandarin, Wen Wu's look as well.
It's okay. I called him that too, even in the movie. I was like, that's a
I know,
Mandarin.
I know. He's not the Mandarin, and then a Death Dealer. So yeah, there's that collaboration where how do we bridge and make the looks cohesive, that the Shang-Chi look will fit in to the conceptual visual look of Tao Lo's look. Obviously, it's all based off of Chinese history,
Yeah.
but the point was that it's nothing specific. Like it's
Yeah.
not like exactly this era in
Yeah.
Chinese history. It's inspired by just the Chinese past.
Okay, so I'm going to keep digging into the comic book roots because that's what this podcast is about. And you'll probably never get asked this at any other interview. So I want to talk a little bit about more comic book stuff. As a fan, the Mandarin in the comic, he was an Iron Man villain, right? And that's why I thought it was cool that that the mention of him and the ideas were there in Iron Man 1, even though he didn't show up until what was he in Iron Man 3, right? They brought the Mandarin character in and then they go back on it. I don't know. I like that twist. I thought it was neat. But in the comic book, the cool thing about the Mandarin is he had actually rings on his fingers, and each of them had a different I don't know, laser that came out of it, like electricity or cold blasts and things like that. So Iron Man, a high-tech character, would fight this magical character. Well, they released the rings came from space and things like that later. But the idea was that they were originally finger rings. What point did you guys decide they were going to be these arm bracelets instead?
Yeah, I mean it's one of the interesting parts about the development process here, because we always start with the comics, but we're never beholden to them, meaning like we're not shackled like that we have to do a one-to-one interpretation of the comics, not only in their visuals but also conceptually in their stories, right? And including their power sets. And because I think was this the 25th MCU film?
Yeah.
I think that came out. So with all of that in mind, like we have to consider the past 25 films or 24 films, right? So one of the films that just came out was called was Avengers Endgame and Infinity War, right? With Thanos and the rings, or sorry, not the rings, with the
stones.
shoot, the stones. My brain's not working.
Okay, yeah, exactly. The stones are kind of not really rings, but they're sitting in like a ring position on a glove. So okay, I got it. Yeah,
and they all have different power sets. So
yeah.
it's too similar,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think from the early on decision was that we're gonna have to try to figure out something that's different and unique, right? But still trying to respect the comic book roots.
Yeah.
So early on, Destin had the idea of putting the rings on the wrists of Wenwu and then eventually Shang-Chi, right? So I can't remember the particular film that he was referencing, but the other one that they referenced was also Kung Fu Hustle, right? So you see that, and there's that one guy who has the bracelets, but those are not just from those movies; those are real rings. They actually call them rings because they're kung fu training rings, right? Yeah. So to strengthen and to harden the arms and the hands and everything, so they would use that in Kung Fu Hustle. They used them not just for training purposes. They used them. Well, I think he was using he was a chef. I think he was cook.
Yeah.
And then he used them as like for fighting, and it enhanced his punching ability.
Yeah.
So that idea came from Destin. The producer came and told me that idea, and we started running with that.
Yeah.
Because and then I had the idea of how, because the question is, how does it sit on the arm? What how do they actually, are they just dangling and loose, and how big are they? I had the idea that they would be sitting down at the wrist, and then when whoever was wearing it would activate the rings, they would rise and separate up the arm, and then they would glow, and then even like the veins in between the rings would kind of glow. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of where that idea came from.
And I guess in the comic books, there's definitely the mystery of where those rings came from. And I guess you were definitely playing up with this. I know you're not going to tell me what the truth is, but it seemed like from the post-credit sequence that there is an actual mystery behind where those rings actually have come from. Was that always in the plan? And like when you're designing it and things like that, they're like, okay, you got to make him look like this because it's going to happen. Something's going to happen later with them.
I know we're getting into dangerous territory. No, I think it is a mystery, right? Like we're not. That was intentional. Like,
I love that.
We're not spelling out anything. I think a lot of the design wise is just like, everything in this movie. We're digging deep into Chinese mythology, Chinese history, and we're using all of that. We're being careful not to be like specific, like this is from this dynasty or that kind of thing, but just taking everything and then using that to help come up with themes, looks, designs. I'll speak on another thing when it comes to like the rings. Like so much of what our department was doing, all of us, myself and all the artists that I had the pleasure of leading, like we were tasked to figure out what are the power sets of the rings.
Yeah.
So we did so much exploration, from things that were, a little bit more comic accurate to things that you saw from the movie. How can the rings be utilized? I mentioned how the visuals of how it goes up the arm, but like what do they actually do? You know, so that was a big part of our exploration and trying to figure out that language, the visuals, the energy of what does it look like, and then of course the design of the rings. And a lot of my artists did a lot of really cool designs, and the one that you see in the film was designed by Jackson Z. Did an amazing job.
Yeah, I thought it was cool the way that the rings not only could shoot things that like power blasts from his hands, but they could come off and throw as projectiles. They could spin around and hit people from different angles. I thought that was something we hadn't seen before. So I guess it worked out for the best that it wasn't just a bunch of rings that shot lasers out of them, right?
No, and there another cool move that I think Alexi Bricklot, one of my artists, did was using them to like as like steps. So there's that one scene in the end where
Yeah,
I think it was Shang-Chi who like used them and he's like stepping up to do a kick downward, like
yeah,
things like that.
that's
Or
very cool.
how they're used as like bracelets that connect even though they're all separated, and to hold on to whatever they need to hold on. So
Yeah,
yeah, all that exploration was really fun,
it's
and
just
always trying to figure out like what are power sets, what are
yeah,
some fun moments and gags that could happen. We do things that are not specific, like this is going to happen in this scene, but they come to us and say, you guys explore. What are some fun things that can happen with the rings? So we did everything from offensive to defensive to things that would help people,
yeah. Oh.
obviously things that can hurt people. So there's a lot of things that we
And I think it worked. It made it so interesting to watch those fight sequences because we've seen kung fu action before, but kung fu action with these things flying around on both of them, especially in the end sequences, is just incredible. I want to quickly bounce back to the original question and answer you gave. Will we ever see those original designs that you did? Will they be in like the Art of Shang-Chi book, or will you release them yourself on your socials?
yeah, eventually in the Art of Shang-Chi book will definitely, because I did so many.
Yeah,
I did so many, so I can't wait to share that stuff because
nice.
it was a fun exploration and all different types of designs.
And so the first time you draw Shang-Chi and you draw Wenwu, you don't know who the cast is yet. So when Simu Liu and Tony Leung become cast as these two characters, does that start to change the way that you guys design the finish and finalize the costumes?
Yeah. Again, because we worked so early in the process, like this is an example of I was doing designs of Shang-Chi before Simu was cast.
Yeah.
So, I'm just I didn't want to paint any particular Asian actor, although in the past I have tried to like cast them myself, like suggesting, hey, how about this actor or actress?
Yeah.
But this one I just painted a very more of a nondescript Asian male character. But yeah, once we, and the same thing happened with Wenwu. We were early on designs that the artists were doing. Didn't have Tony Leung.
Yeah.
So yeah, once they're cast, that can change designs in the sense because of we got to see their height. Obviously, that's one big thing.
Oh, interesting.
Body proportion. Yeah, because every body is unique. Like the Chris Hemsworth body is very different than a Paul Rudd body. So based on their own individual aspects to their
Sure.
physique or their
Sure.
body or whatever, or size of their head, all of those things are considered, and then we have to adjust and sometimes like would have to change things accordingly.
Yeah. One of the characters, this always happens in Marvel movies, it seems like. You have that one super cool looking character like Taskmaster, but this one we've got Death Dealer, who was from the comics. I don't know who you or your team designed this character, but he looked super cool, but then we don't see much of him. What are your thoughts on how the process of designing the Death Dealer character?
Yeah, that was designed by Jackson Z, who also designed the rings, right? And
Wow.
he also designed Wenwu, so he did a lot of
Wow.
amazing things on this film. But Death Dealer, yeah, when we're designing these characters, sometimes I think that was even an example of, he designed that character and they loved him so much that he became kind of one of the one of the main characters
Oh, okay. So he
right
wasn't
hand
even
right
maybe a
hand
main character.
man's.
They just kind of put him in there when they saw this cool artwork for him.
Yeah, that happens. That happens, right? So he came up with that design, and he was basing the mask off of like the Chinese
Yeah.
opera kind of looks.
Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. And then obviously starting with the comic, but you see the comic look, and what you see on film is very different. But you see some inspiration from the original comic. That's how we always do it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's part of the fun. But
Yeah.
yeah, that character looks awesome.
Yeah, it looks so cool. Now, I just found out, after watching all these videos and reading about the movie, that Tao Lo actually appeared in a Marvel comic. It first appeared in Thor number 301 back in, I guess, the late 70s or early 80s. It's crazy. Did you know about this place that they had created in the comic? And why didn't you use something like Kunlun from, Iron Fist? Because, there's already a magical city in the Marvel universe.
I this is the first I'm hearing of it. I didn't know it was an actual
It's actually on the
Marvel.
speculation list for comics now, right? It's like a top
Oh,
speculation comic because it was the actual first appearance of the city was actually in a comic in Marvel. So it's amazing.
you know
Yeah.
what? They obviously like that's beyond me because they have their researchers. They have people that dig deep into the comic. And it might be like one sentence in
Yeah.
like a Marvel comic in the 60s or the
Whoever
70s.
whoever's job that is, that guy is doing a great job. Let's look at
Yeah,
super
yeah. So
deep
I did.
pulls.
I did not know that. I
Yeah.
did not know that.
Yeah, I know. It's so crazy to see that. And then obviously Shang-Chi is its own character. You probably didn't want to cross over Iron Fist. There was an Iron Fist television show already, but there, you see the similarities with the city, the magical Chinese city or Kung Fu city that only appears certain times or a certain way to get there. Can you talk about any ideas that there was discussion of not using it or using it?
You know what? I haven't even seen Iron Fist, so
I loved it. I thought it was great. Everybody hates it, but I thought it was fantastic. I love that guy. He looks like Danny Rand in the comics. And I mean, obviously the budget isn't as big as the films, right? So the glowing and the fighting wasn't up to par, but they hit all the touch points in there. I thought it was okay. I didn't hate it as much as others, but I do because I'm a huge Iron Fist fan, and I was
oh.
hoping that the next Shang-Chi movie in the Iron Fist comics, they had these tournaments with all these different kung fu fighters that they created in Marvel, and that's what I want to see in the next one. Like he has to go to this, he meets Iron
That's what
Fist
that's
and all
what
these.
people thought this movie was going to be a tournament movie, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a lot of tropes in martial arts films that people just assume, and that's why I thought it was so good. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Tao Lo. Then this is obviously the big secret of the movie, and the most probably one of the most fulfilling things outside the bus fight scene at the beginning. Talk a little bit about the design here. How much research did your team have to do for this? Because that's the thing. When I started watching this, I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys put in all the Chinese mythological characters that people think are Pokemon, but they're actually from China and they're moving and jumping. And I was like, oh, wow, this is like, this was the part of the movie that, I mean, the whole movie was great up to this point, but this point, usually the third act kind of falls apart. But this one was like, okay, get ready. Here's the third act. We're not going to slow it down. We're going to go even more crazy and show you all this other great design work. So talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, I think, the majority of the movie is very grounded and
Yeah.
which is really fun, the bus fight and the scaffolding
Yeah, that
and
was great in the Macau. That was amazing.
and the characters are mainly wearing kind of just street clothes,
Yeah.
right? Minus a few, but yeah, once you get to the third act and Tao Lo, like that for our department, like talk about fun, right?
Yeah.
Like we get to do things. That's part of the joy of working at on working on the MCU films. Is like every film, like it just introduces like another aspect to this universe, and certainly this with Tao Lo and Shang-Chi with the Chinese mythology, all of that look, was just so fun to explore. And those creatures in particular, like the team had so much fun. Shout out to John Staub, who he's the one who designed Morris.
Yeah. Love
And
Morris.
then
What a great character.
yeah, he designed those the food dogs,
Yeah,
like
the Foo Dogs. Yeah.
those big old dogs. And
Yeah.
then Tully Summers designed like those the birds on fire. And he also designed the Great Protector. And then shout out also to Jared Morantz, who designed that big beast at the end that Michelle Yao's character calls the Dweller in Darkness, right? And then as well as all those soul eaters, those
Yeah.
little bat-like little creatures. So yeah, designing all those creatures, and then myself doing Shang-Chi's hero costume, and Yana Shermer designed Jia Ling's hero costume, the
Yep.
white version of
The white
that.
version, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, that was just a pleasure to just really explore that kind of a new type of mythology that we haven't seen in the MCU yet.
Yeah,
So that
exactly.
was so much fun.
So what was the one thing that you thought was the most challenging to do the visual design for?
I mean, personally, it was Shang-Chi's look
Okay.
because the story, the way it goes in these productions is like the story is constantly evolving,
Mm.
right? So they're trying to figure out, what is any particular design, you know? So if they don't have the story down, it makes it impossible to really land on a look, right?
Yeah.
Because if you know, like early on for like Ant-Man, like exactly what that suit was, right?
Yeah.
So in the case of Shang-Chi, like that was evolving. So that's why that one took like many months of just trying to, is it more contemporary? Is it more, is it very based off of Chinese mythology, and that's kind of where we landed with the lore of Tao Lo and the dragon's scales and the motif. Yeah. So and that's the other thing, like part of that design that I did that you see in that his upside down triangle motif.
Yeah.
The design within there is very intricate, and
Yeah.
I had the idea to put in the symbol of the infinity knot or the eternal knot, and it's a symbol that you see throughout Chinese history. You'll
Mm.
see it in the past. It goes thousands of years in the past to contemporary present day. You'll see it in everywhere from fashion to like architecture to just kind of everywhere in art. And it's a symbol that it represents a never-ending cycle. It represents like the connection between the past and the present, and it also it symbolizes when it's given as a gift, like a connection between the giver and the receiver.
Yeah.
So that certainly works in this case, given the storyline of what that suit is. So for me personally, Shang-Chi was definitely a long, fun journey, I think. But as far overall, I think the hardest thing for the whole team to kind of figure out what were the rings, right?
Mm.
And it was challenging to come up with the look of the rings, but in combination, what do they do?
Yeah.
So I think that one was a really, really long, difficult, challenging task, because as we were coming with ideas, you know, Destin and Dave Callahan, the writer and the director, and Destin, as well as the producer Jonathan Schwartz, everyone, we're all trying to figure out what are these things. What do they do? Because it wasn't set. It's not like there was a script, here it is, now we just have to draw it and design it.
Well,
No, it's all collaborative. Like as we're coming up with ideas, they'll take something that we did that, oh, that's really cool, and they'll elaborate on that, and then vice versa. They'll come with ideas, and we'll be like, oh, but then how about if it does this? And then they'll be like, oh, that's cool. So it's a lot of back and forth, as we're having meeting after meeting, and I'm showing them ideas, and they're telling us ideas. So that was a long one, but it was a fun one.
oh, so interesting. I just want to go back to your answer about the Shang-Chi design in the upside down triangle. You said it was an eternal knot. You didn't say actually it was part of the Eternals, right?
No, no, no. Oh, please. Please do not let articles come out. It's yeah, if you can look it up. It's called the Infinity Knot or the Eternal Knot.
Okay.
It's a symbol iconography from, actually it's not solely based in Chinese history. A lot of different cultures have used it, but the Chinese culture has definitely adopted and used that symbol throughout their history and different areas. But yeah.
Okay, great. That's just like so good. I can
Be
just see
careful
someone
there.
listening just going, wait, wait, wait. What did you just say? What did you just say? Another question about the dragon. That's not Fin Fang Foom, is it? That's not an inside Easter egg joke there to have the
No,
dragon. This is a,
no, 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 no.
you guys didn't go that deep into it. Okay, that's interesting to know. Okay, you have, I guess the next thing coming out from you guys is the Hawkeye show. Is that right?
I mean, what if it's still going on?
Yeah.
The Disney Plus
Did you guys
animated
do stuff,
show?
anything for that? Probably not. It's an animation, or do you do stuff for What If?
Oh, yeah, that was our department as well.
Oh,
Ryan
really? Oh,
Meinerding, yeah, Ryan
interesting.
Meinerding led that one. Yeah.
So the
Yeah,
Agent Carter as Captain Britain or Captain Carter, that came from the visual development department.
it came from all Ryan's mind
Oh
or whatever,
wow.
his brain, because he's the one who designed, or he came up with the look of that show, and he designed
Oh.
like a majority of those
Oh
characters.
great,
Yeah,
great.
it's pretty amazing.
What's the reaction in house there of the show? Is it exciting to see these characters animated? Is it more freeing because it's like done like this?
I think there's a freedom story wise and storytelling wise. They're all comic book movies, but essentially they're like genre movies, right? They all
Yeah.
have different, takes. Like the Ant-Man movie is a heist movie, right?
Yeah.
And then so when it comes to animation, you know, our studio is definitely embracing that medium. So they'll do things that you can't do in live action, or certain things are a little heightened. But yeah, it's so cool to see, like, something that's familiar. We all know the MCU, now that's been like well over a decade of just world building, and we know these characters intimately. And then to see them come alive in an animated form
Yeah.
where they're not 100% exactly the live action version, but enough that you're like, yeah, that feels like
Yeah.
Peggy, or that feels like these
And you have the
characters.
voices too, right? That's
Yeah,
I think a
yeah,
big
yeah.
win to make you believe in it more. But yeah, I thought when the
Yeah.
first trailers came out, I thought the animation style was incredible. And it's great to know that, yeah, of course, you guys must have been involved. There's so many original designs in this series that must definitely involve your team.
Yeah, yeah, it's really exciting. And then we're all fans of animation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So to see what they've done is it's pretty incredible.
And then,
But yeah,
yeah,
after that, I think I don't know what is next.
it is Hawkeye. I was
we,
checking.
we
Hawkeye is
it is
confirmed.
okay.
And then all the other ones are unconfirmed, like Moon Knight and She-Hulk. There's no actual date, but Hawkeye is definitely coming out in November, is the
Well,
next one.
Hawkeye, and then we have Eternals as well as
Yes.
Spider-Man, right?
Oh, Eternals, we're going to have to do this again for Eternals, right? Because there's a lot of costumes in that one.
Yeah, that one, Ryan Mannerding led that one. So
Okay.
like, yeah, he had a whole team of amazing artists. But yeah, I'm excited for that one. Chloe Zhao, and then Spider-Man, of course, is going to be awesome. And then
Mhm.
next year, the next one that I led, because this year I led WandaVision, and Black Widow, and Shang-Chi. And then next year's, the first thing that I led is going to be Thor: Love and
Oh,
Thunder,
wow.
which I was so excited about.
When before we go, let's quickly touch on Black Widow because yeah, I forgot that you also did that one because you're posting all the artwork for that as well. That final costume looks phenomenal. I think you did the best job of all of them on that one. Can you talk a little bit about with her character been around for so long since the second Iron Man? Is this like give Andy carte blanche to do his ultimate Black Widow costume, or like what's the development process on that?
Oh, thanks. It's pretty much the same. Like I've had the good fortune of designing all of the Black Widow suits since her second appearance. The only one I didn't do is her Iron Man 2 appearance or look. But and yeah, the one that I did in Black Widow is my favorite.
Yeah, the best one. Yeah.
So yeah, I think I started off going in the direction of, I don't even know exactly which artist or what era it was. It might have been 90s, or it
Mhm.
could have been 80s, like when she had a full gray suit.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I do remember this very iconic X-Men cover that Jim Lee did with Wolverine, Captain America, and
Oh
Black
yeah,
Widow.
that's the Frank Miller costume, right? We were talking
Is it
about that on
really?
social. He when he brought Black Widow into his run in the 80s, he had her with short hair and a full black full gray spandex outfit. And the Black
Ah,
Widow logo was just on her chest on the corner
yes.
pocket, right? And that was it.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. And she had like a big collar too on that
Yeah,
one,
and a big
right?
collar, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, some of my early designs I even did with the short hair
Nice.
and full gray. It was definitely inspired, and definitely one thing I really wanted to bring into this design that we just never got to put in the past was her gold gauntlets as well as the gold
Yes.
belt,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So I really wanted to get that in there, and then as the design process goes, then working with Kate Shortland, and as the story changes, like I'll do so many different iterations, and eventually it has gray in it, but it had the gray and the black.
Yeah.
And I try to bring in little subtle motifs. As part of the fun of doing designs is like that you see, if you see the torso area, it kind of makes a spider, and not only does it make like that hourglass symbol of a Black Widow on the belly, but also there's like little legs that come out of it that subtly like a Black Widow. But yeah, and then of course the white, that was fun because being able to do the snow version of that and giving her a whole different look. And I think the designs work so well because she's got that red hair. So I'm glad she got back the red hair rather than going blonde.
Yeah.
Because if you have black and then red hair, it just pops. And then even with the white suit with the red hair.
Did you do her Infinity War outfit? Because it ties in with the ending of this Black Widow film.
Yeah. I mean, again, like I did all of them since Avengers, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Infinity War one, yeah, that was fun because essentially it's her Civil War costume, but then she's on the run. She doesn't have time to make a whole new suit. So she not only dyes her hair, she adds that vest to that costume. And it was so cool because on this one, as we're helping to develop the look of Yelena, I had the idea of like, what if that vest is Yelena's, So I was doing designs with Yelena having the vest, and they liked that idea. So it became one of those things where it's like, oh, retroactively, we're giving that costume meaning. So it's really cool to see.
And then who did Taskmaster?
I got to design Taskmaster.
Yeah, great design.
That was thanks. That was a lot of fun because the mandate for that one was it's got to be, the whole movie is more like tactical, real world.
No giant cape. Right?
Exactly. So
can't move around in.
From day one, we knew Taskmaster's not going to have a cape, and I kind of touched on it in some previous answers about 25 films in, or by that point, whatever it was, 23, 20, whatever it was. Like, there's so many films that we've had, so going the full skull mask was something that they wanted to avoid, mainly because we had Red Skull, we had Crossbones, so Kate definitely wanted to go very tactical with his look.
Oh, interesting.
A little bit, somewhat more real world, but obviously we're always pushing that real worldness to be heightened as much as heightened and iconic as much as possible. And then one of the early passes, because it's not just when we're doing designs, it's not just like one person doing design. It's usually like multiple artists. Yeah, Jackson Z early on in one of the first passes did a design with the visor kind of look.
Yeah,
and she really liked that kind of look. So from that point on, like all the subsequent iterations had more of that. And the whole idea was, you see like some of that technology kind of going on in there. So there's a lot of like readouts and stuff like that. So that kind of, and on top of that, conceptually, it's a bigger area for reflection.
Yeah.
So that the whole the conceit of Taskmaster being able to mimic. So especially in that moment when they first encounter each other on that bridge and they're face to face.
Yeah.
So Natasha actually sees herself in that visor.
Yeah,
so
good. Like
there's
that.
a lot of things like,
we got to see more. That costume is so cool, and that character is so cool. That's got to be like, because if they can mimic, whatever they end up doing with it again later, having able to mimic Shang-Chi's martial arts and all the other characters together, that's still I love that character from the comics, right? Whenever he shows up, I'm like, oh, this guy's great. He's got Captain America's shield, got Daredevil's Billy Club, he's got Hawkeye's bow and arrow, he's got Moon Knight's cape. It's like, this guy's gonna be unstoppable, right? So
no, that's part of the
point of what happened in the film. I'm not gonna lie, what the reveal was there, but he looked cool though when he shows up on that bridge. Yeah, it's like, oh, here we go. Yeah, exactly. That was a good reveal. That's what I thought Death Dealer was going to be too. I thought it was going to reveal to be somebody else, but then you guys never did that. But that's still
no. Good. I mean that's part of the fun of the MCU. Like characters that whether you feel like they didn't have enough time to shine or whatever, like they can always come back, right? So
that's great.
And then when they come back, they can keep on evolving. So we're excited for the future to see what other characters. I mean, look at the Falcon Winter Soldier. He had Zemo come back and things like that.
Exactly.
And wearing his iconic mask.
So everybody's trying to piece together the future of the MCU. Now you've told us you were designing Shang-Chi in early 2019. So that means you're designing films now that will come out in 2023 at least, right? Probably even further ahead of that. I know you're not going to tell us that, but what's work like now in the COVID situation, in this collaboration? I mean, that's the other thing I was interested. You said 2019. I think that Simu actually went to Comic-Con, right, in 2019 to announce that he was going to be Shang-Chi. And then they went to film it in Sydney, but then there was the pandemic happened. So they filmed that entire movie in Australia during the pandemic and then made it and released it like now. That's
Yeah.
incredible, right?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's crazy the speed of how these things are made. Well, I can tell you the ones that I've been working on, right?
Oh,
So I
okay.
already mentioned the ones that I already mentioned was Thor: Love and Thunder, right? And then for the past year, I've been working on the Marvels as well as Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
Okay.
I'm currently working on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume
Oh,
3.
wow. Great.
Yeah, so it's I mean, man, all of these films are so oh man, it's very hard working here because there's so many cool things that happen in each of these films,
Yeah.
and you're just like, oh, I can't tell anyone.
Yeah.
Like, I can't even tell my family because they're, my kids and my wife, they're fans of these shows and movies as well, and I don't wanna ruin it.
Yeah.
And my friends, obviously,
Yeah.
I don't want to ruin it for them. So even though they'll ask me like, "Oh, what happens in this or that?" I'm like, "Nope, I want you to enjoy it in the way that I will never be able
Yeah,
to."
yeah, that's true, right? That's right. Oh, so
So
that's a good last question. It's like, what movies are you looking forward to when you see the
yeah,
trailer like the rest of us? Because I mean, when you look at like the Matrix Resurrections or Dune, you're looking at, whoa, the design on that looks really cool. But like, what are you looking forward to?
yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not just Marvel films, right? But the cool thing about working here as well, because there's so many projects, and now there's five of us that are supervising the films and shows. So before it was for a long time, it was like me and Ryan for the past like 6 years, where we were the only ones leading these projects. But in the past year, we with Ian Joyner, Jackson Z, Rodney Fontabella have become supervisors. So now they're leading their own shows or movies. So more and more, I'm not able to touch every single project. Whereas before, like there was like I'd be able to at least have a hand in like every single project. So more and more, I'm losing touch of like what happens in every film, right?
Yeah.
So like Ryan's been working on Black Panther, the next
Oh,
one,
yeah.
Wakanda Forever,
Yeah.
and I even though I can find out a lot of details about what's happening, I intentionally try to like there's some things I cannot avoid and I'm gonna know, but there's a lot of things where I'm like, okay, don't tell me yet because I
Oh,
want
that's
to
great. Yeah.
as much as possible. When I watch it, I could be like, oh, because I want to experience the way you do,
Yeah.
Casey.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
but I'm not complaining, right? I'm
Yeah.
not complaining. But so with that in mind, to answer your question, like, yeah, I mean, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. I think every single Marvel project that I'm not working on, like all like Moon Knight, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
She Hulk,
Yeah.
and then Spider Man coming out, and
Yeah.
Eternals. Like I'm so excited for every single project. Just as a first and foremost, I'm a fan. I grew up reading comics and eventually drew comics. And then outside of Marvel, like I'm excited for the upcoming Batman. Is it the Batman?
Yep. The Batman.
That's
Yeah.
coming out like that because I'm a huge fan of the Christopher Nolan
Yeah.
Batman series, and I love dark films, so that one has a little bit of that flavor. Dune, of course. Yeah, I don't know what else is coming out.
Did you see The Matrix today?
Oh yeah, I just saw this
Yeah.
morning. Of course, yep. I'm excited for that as well. Yeah, there's just so many, and then TV shows. I can't wait for the next season of Warrior,
Oh,
Cobra Kai. Yeah, there's
did you see Snake Eyes by any chance?
I have not. I
Okay.
have not. I was a big GI Joe fan
Yeah. We talked
growing
about it
up.
last
Growing
time.
up,
Yeah. That's why I want to know if you saw it.
yeah, and the cartoon. So I saw the trailers and it looked really exciting. So I do want to watch that. I am a little disappointed that I'm hearing not the best reviews.
Yeah.
So I'm like, but I still want to watch it.
Subjectively, thinking about it, it was a bad movie. But as a G.I.
Uh,
Joe fan, and I love Snake Eyes, it was great. Like if I was 8 years old, this is as good as the the animated movie. It has that theme of
oh,
just like, wow, it's so exciting. He's not even wearing the costume for most of the time. It's hard to do these origin movies, right? And also you think, well, isn't Snake Eyes doesn't speak and it doesn't have a face? Why does he have these two things in this movie, right? So you're already kind of weirded out
that's my
about that.
only conflict with the movie going in is
Yeah,
because like Snake Eyes was always the silent
yeah,
and very mysterious. You don't see his face,
yeah.
so the fact. I know it's an origin film, but it felt a little weird
That
going into
that's
like,
that's why I think it's good that somebody would like do a comparison between like a Snake Eyes and a Shang-Chi. Like, you both have source material that's over 40 years old, 50 years old. And then how do
yeah,
you keep the essence there for
yep.
the original basis and then, but also update at the same time? I think Snake Eyes went a little bit too far away from it than
I
you
see.
guys did. And so the essence is kind of lost.
I've been waiting for the GI Joe franchise to just kind of take off because I want to
Yeah.
see more of that.
No,
Because I
I think that's a tough sell. I mean, next week we're gonna get the new He-Man and Masters Universe. They reimagined it. I think Jeff Matsuda, who was one of your studio mates, he has
yeah.
redesigned the whole Prince Adam and Eternia, and it looks sick. But it looks like it's definitely aimed at little kids, but it looks amazing to me. Like I love Matsuda's
Oh
designs.
yeah. Oh yeah. Jeff is amazing. Like he's I've always looked up to him, and I love his style. Like we both started our essentially our careers working for Rob
Yeah,
Liefeld at Extreme Studios Image Comics back in the 90s.
yeah,
And then I've seen him kind of flourish and going to animation. If you remember, he did the Jackie Chan
yeah.
show,
That's
the
right.
cartoon,
Yeah,
which I love the
yeah,
design and the
yeah.
stories. He did the Batman, I think,
Yeah, he did the
cartoon.
Batman show. I love those figures. They're so weird, the design.
Yeah, the designs are so. I mean, he's always been a great
Yeah,
just character designer.
yeah,
So yeah, I love how he reimagined the He-Man. Like it's very he pushed it right,
yeah,
but that's okay. Like
yeah.
it is. It seems like it's more for kids, and
Yeah.
I guess the one that Kevin Smith did is more for like people our
I don't
age.
know about I don't know about that. That's going to be a huge blowback on that. I
Controversial.
liked it. I thought it was great. The animation by Powerhouse was incredible. But yeah, I mean, He-Man fans are like very, very possessive. So I'm kind of worried about that. Um,
I know. I enjoyed it too. I enjoyed it too. But yeah, there's a lot of controversy online.
yeah.
Controversy.
So what do you think? I mean, that's a good point to kind of end it on, right? So the MCU has just like a built-in audience. Like it's almost like you can't do any wrong. I mean, Black Widow, there was it wasn't like everyone was just going crazy about it like they are about Shang-Chi, but it doesn't stop people from lining up to see Shang-Chi. And so it's got a built-in audience. But how do you keep yourself challenged? How do you guys keep yourself motivated to go, we got to do better? And like, not just you, but like the whole production has to be like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point is we can do wrong, right?
Okay.
You say because you said you can't do it wrong, we can't go wrong, but we can. But I think first and foremost, it starts with the leader, right? And Kevin Feige.
Hmm.
And I think once you have someone like that, like he's someone that has demonstrated not only from the movies, but from me working with him for the past over a decade. Like I've been in so many meetings where I'm just like in my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is why the MCU has
Yeah. Amazing.
succeeded because the things he says or decisions he's made, I'm just like he gets it,
Yeah.
and I just yeah. So I think the thing that keeps I think the MCU fresh is the fact that, and again it starts with Kevin, is that his whole thinking is just always it's always forward thinking. It's always not resting on your laurels. It's always taking risks. I think he's proven that from obviously from Iron Man to Avengers. The biggest risk was Avengers. Because if any of those movies flopped, we would not be here. And then right after that, he wanted to tackle Guardians of the Galaxy. And then Ant-Man, like all these characters that you're just like, I've heard that for the past decade, where like even with Shang-Chi or Eternals, people are saying it now, where they're like, I don't know if I'm that interested in Shang-Chi,
Yeah.
before this weekend because
Yeah.
I never heard of him.
Yeah.
Like it's not, and then people are saying that right now about Eternals. Like I just don't know those characters. Like
Yeah.
I've heard that way back for Guardians,
Yeah.
but you could say you heard that back on Iron Man.
Yeah.
So it's like it's crazy that 12 years in, we're still hearing that same narrative.
Yeah. I know, right? It seems weird.
And for me, it's kind of frustrating because I'm just like, the common denominator is Kevin,
Yeah.
right? So he not only is he willing to take risks on obscure characters in these properties, he's able to surround himself with people that also get it, right? From I mean, even the fact that, just speaking art wise, he created this visual development team, and the fact that it doesn't exist at other studios in Hollywood, like that alone is something where it's like, oh, he's not just like, oh, we just got to replicate the Hollywood formula. Like he saw the value in creating an in-house group of artists that can create visuals, not only to create a cohesive universe, but to help inspire and push every department and the movie makers into like a unified, cohesive team. And then in his decisions to what directors, like look at the history of our directors. You could make an argument that there's so many directors that are very controversial, not controversial in the sense of like you don't know who they are,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But he's not just like going off of the typical Hollywood formula of like, oh, did they do the latest big smash in Hollywood? Let's get that guy or girl, right? No, he's going off of actual like their talent and ability. He sees like, and it's something that I credit Rob Liefeld with. Just if I were to bring it back to my own story, is like when he first hired me when I was 19 years old. Like I look back at my artwork back then, and I was not actually ready to be a professional. I wasn't good enough, essentially. But he was able to see like something beyond than just my resume, right?
Yeah.
He saw the potential,
Yeah.
and that he knew that he can kind of help harness and foster that. And Kevin, will see that as well. Whether it's with the directors, and then you can say the same thing when it comes to the actors, right? A lot of the actors throughout the history of the MCU are not like the A level star. There are some definitely that were more tested and tried and true, but a lot of them were like, really, you're gonna get that actor? Like you're not sure, but look at them now. That now they are, all of them are all A-list stars, right?
Yeah.
So I think knowing that we have the leadership, starting with Kevin on down, that you can really kind of believe in and trust. And then the fact that we're doing projects that are not the safe. We're not just doing like Iron Man 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Yeah.
and just only Avengers films. Like, every film we do is kind of like, oh, its initial reaction is always a little bit of a head turn and like, really? Okay, sure. But you doubt for a second, but then you remind yourself, wait, this is Kevin, or this is Marvel, like. So and then you hear it in the media, like you still hear people question it.
Yeah.
So I think it's just constantly trusting in the leadership, trusting not only in the leadership, but if you hear Kevin's interviews, what does he trust? He trusts the almost 100 years of comic book creations by Stan Lee, Ditko, like all those comic book creators. There's a reason why Marvel Comics is like the best comic books in the past 100 years, and these characters are beloved, and they're still icons after this many decades. Why? There's a reason why. So you have to dig into the comics to see, why do people love these characters, and then squeeze the essence of why those characters work, why these stories work, reformulate it for the MCU, give it a fresh take that's not beholden to the past, but is inspired and respectful to the past, and then create something new for the live action audience and for the world to see. And for a lot of people, the MCU and these movies are the first time they're encountering these characters. And then so the toughest task is, how do you bring in a new audience that has no idea who Shang-Chi is, and then after watching Shang-Chi, now there's people that love this character and can't wait to see him come up again in the MCU, but then also please the hardcore fans who knew who Shang-Chi was in the past, and still be like, wow, they took a new spin on the character, but it's still inspired by the past, the origins. And I'm on board. I love it. So they've done such a great job, and I can't be prouder to be working for a company that respects the past, looks to the future, and creates something new and fresh every single time.
Wow. I can't think of a better place to end this great chat with Andy Park, the Director of Visual Development at Marvel Studios, than there. So check out Andy Park on Twitter and Instagram and on YouTube, where he's posting his great artwork and some insightful tutorials and art reviews. Find all the episodes with different pop culture creators at www.thehyperroom.com, and please subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. My name is Casey Lau, and I love talking to the creative people behind the things we consume and collect today. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at The Hyper Room. Thanks for listening, and see you again soon inside The Hyper Room. The Hyper Room.